Welcome, friends. You're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we have a truly packed broadcast. The events of the past 24 hours are so numerous that we'll have to work through them methodically, direction by direction. Today we'll be covering Ukraine, the Middle East, West Africa, and several pieces of news from the Baltic region that may seem secondary at first glance, but actually carry a very serious strategic signal. Before we begin, the usual request. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it right now, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss a single episode. YouTube's algorithms are systematically suppressing military analytical content, exactly the kind we produce here. Every new subscriber, every view, every like is real, tangible help that keeps this channel afloat. And a separate, heartfelt thank you to our sponsors and patrons who support us financially. Without your support, this channel simply could not operate in the format it does today. YouTube consistently limits the reach of this type of content. Monetization on military analytical material is virtually non-existent. And it is your contributions that make it possible for us to continue this work. Thank you sincerely. Now, let's get into it. Sumy sector. We'll start in the north. On the Sumy sector, Russian units have managed to improve their positions in the area of the settlement of Konstantinovka, specifically in the vicinity of Polovaya Street. One important nuance: the actual map adjustment happened somewhat earlier, before today. What was published today were objective control footage, confirming the positional improvement as a documented fact. In other words, this is not a fresh breakthrough. It is the verification of an advance that had already taken place, previously recorded only at the level of reconnaissance reports and field dispatches. The grey zone on this sector continues to gradually contract in Russia's favor. The Kharkiv direction and the Kupiansk front remain without significant changes. Positional confrontation continues, activity is present, but no tectonic shifts have been recorded over the past 24 hours. Slavansk sector, the story of the day. And here is where things get genuinely interesting. The Slavansk direction today is, without exaggeration, the primary operational theater across the entire Ukrainian front. Over the past several days, according to some analysts over the past week, Russian units have executed what can only be described in one word: a lightning maneuver. Let's break it down by the map. As recently as April 20, 2026, the situation looked like this. Russian units were holding positions in the area of Privolnoye, Golubovka and Fedorovka Vtoraya, and the logic of the preceding weeks suggested that the next object of pressure would be the settlement of Rye Alexandrovka, its southwestern outskirts. That, it appears, is exactly where Ukrainian analytical and reconnaissance attention was concentrated. However, Russian command made an unconventional decision. Rather than continuing frontal pressure on Rye Alexandrovka, having accumulated a sufficient critical mass of forces within that triangle of settlements, the Russian side sharply pivoted its axis of advance westward toward the Seversky Donbass Canal. It was precisely this decision that came as an operational surprise to Ukrainian command. As a result of this maneuver, Russian units successfully displaced Ukrainian formations from the canal zone and established control over its bank along the stretch between the settlements of Markovo, Novo Markovo, and the bridge at the intersection of the canal with Highway M03. By preliminary calculations, the length of this bridgehead along the canal is approximately 12 kilometers. This is no longer a tactical foothold. This is a full-fledged operational bridgehead. Furthermore, Russian units have crossed to the Ukrainian side of the canal and have been confirmed in the area of the settlements of Malinovka and Tikhonovka. This information is corroborated both by objective control footage and by accounts from servicemen directly participating in the operation. Now, what is all of this for, and why does it matter from an operational standpoint? The purpose of this maneuver is not simply the seizure of territory along the canal. This is systemic pressure on the entire operational concept of the Ukrainian side in this sector. By forming a bridgehead west of the canal, Russian command is forcing Ukrainian command to redeploy reserves from the Nikolaevka and Rye Alexandrovka areas toward Kramatorsk to eliminate the flanking threat. This automatically weakens the defense on those sections that had previously been held more firmly. If those reserves prove insufficient or arrive too late, the Russian side gains the opportunity to continue its westward advance and potentially reach the eastern outskirts of Kramatorsk, and that would mean not merely a tactical success, but a strategic rupture. The entire sector of the front would be severed into two isolated parts, the Druzhkovka-Konstantinovka sector and the Slavansk sector. After such a split, the Russian side would be able to engage each of these directions separately, substantially simplifying the task of further advance. This is precisely the scenario that Ukrainian command must prevent in the coming days, because if it fails to do so, the operational situation in the northern Donetsk direction risks spiraling out of control. Konstantinovka and Dovha Balka, a methodical offensive. Slightly to the south, in the Konstantinovka area, equally significant changes are being recorded. As recently as April 24th, the map looked different. Today, confirmed information is coming in regarding improvements to Russian positions on several segments simultaneously, in the southwestern part of Konstantinovka and in the central southeastern part of the settlement of Dovha Balka. Allow me to recall the context we discussed several days ago. For several weeks, the Russian side conducted an active psychological campaign against Ukrainian positions in the Dovha Balka area, systematically dropping leaflets urging units to surrender or abandon their positions without a fight. The operation went on for quite some time. This is a textbook instrument of informational psychological influence, and it was applied with deliberate focus on this particular sector. By all appearances, once it became clear that this method had exhausted its potential, the Russian side transitioned to direct combat operations. The first step was the establishment of physical control over Highway 00522, which connects Dovha Balka and Konstantinovka. Cutting this supply artery effectively isolated the Dovha Balka garrison from logistics coming out of Konstantinovka. This is a classic encirclement maneuver. First you sever the supply lines, then you finish the enemy off under conditions of ammunition and reinforcement shortages. After cutting the road, Russian units began the direct assault on Dovha Balka. Today, video was published, objective control footage capturing active combat in the eastern part of the settlement. Ukrainian FPV drone operators were striking Russian forward positions in that area. The assault is underway. This is a fact confirmed by video evidence. In parallel, the western part of Konstantinovka has also seen improvements in Russian positions. Footage has been published, confirming the presence of Russian units within multi-story buildings in that district. These are not reconnaissance teams or saboteurs. Sources connected to both sides of the confrontation agree that in recent days, regular Russian army units have joined the operations in Konstantinovka, not merely small assault groups. Thus, by the close of April 26th, the Russian side has established control over approximately 10–15% of Konstantinovka's territory and continues to advance northward. The pace of the offensive is accelerating, and that is the critically important detail. Zaporizhzhia and Dobropilya. Directions on the Zaporizhzhia and Dobropilya directions, no significant map changes have been recorded over the past 24 hours. Combat operations are ongoing. Russian units continue to apply pressure, but no breakthroughs worthy of a dedicated analysis have been observed on these sectors. We continue to monitor. Strategic aviation. A strike is being prepared. We must separately address information coming from sources tracking the activity of Russian strategic aviation. According to this data, active regrouping and redeployment of strategic aviation assets is being recorded in the area of Engels Air Base. The meaning of these movements is unambiguous. The Russian side is preparing for another mass strike. According to available assessments, the strike could be delivered within the next 2 to 3 days. That is, literally on the eve of the May holidays. This is likely only the first wave. After the May holidays, or in the interval between them, a second strike is expected, which will be accompanied by more intensive ground pressure. In other words, the next 2 weeks on the Ukrainian theatre of war promise to be extremely tense. The Baltics, the Suwalki corridor, moving on to the Baltic region. This is a piece of news that many may have overlooked, but which deserves the closest possible attention. The Lithuanian Seimas has passed a law authorizing the accelerated construction of a military training base in the area of the settlement of Kapčiamiestis, in the southwestern part of Lithuania, at the very heart of the Suwalki corridor. The law provides for the bypassing of a number of environmental procedures, which in itself speaks volumes about the urgency with which NATO member states are approaching this project. In its first phase, the base is designed to accommodate approximately 4,000 servicemen from alliance member states simultaneously. Now, why does this matter? The Suwalki corridor is a strip of territory roughly 100 kilometers wide that separates the Kaliningrad Oblast from the Republic of Belarus. This is a strategically significant zone that, in the event of any serious escalation between NATO and Russia, would immediately become a focal point for both sides. The logic is straightforward. If Kaliningrad were to come under blockade, the land corridor through Suwalki would be the only route for its relief. The fact that NATO and Lithuania are making the decision to build a large military training base here right now is not simply a routine strengthening of defenses. This is the laying of the infrastructural foundation for the potential holding of this corridor in the event of an escalation that a number of Western analysts are projecting toward the 2030 horizon. In other words, NATO today is methodically closing the window of vulnerability in Suwalki, and doing so with full deliberation. Mali, the African core under fire. Now we shift to West Africa, and here a truly dramatic story awaits us. Over the past 24 hours, an unprecedented volume of urgent operational information has come out of Mali. A reminder of the context: Mali is one of Russia's key allies in Africa. The country hosts the African core of the Russian Ministry of Defense, which supports the current government and safeguards Russian interests in the region. Yesterday, April 25th, armed formations, which official and affiliated media describe as terrorists and separatists, launched a large-scale, coordinated operation across several regions of the country simultaneously. The advance came from the north along multiple operational axes at once. By the close of April 25th, combat had been recorded in Kidal, northeastern Mali, in Gao, central part of the country, in the Sévaré area, in Koutiala, southern Mali, and, most alarmingly, in the immediate vicinity of Bamako, the capital of the state. The first hours of the situation's development made a heavy impression even on observers sympathetic to the government. Footage rapidly spread online, showing dozens of units of armor and motor transport belonging to the separatists moving freely across the country's territory. Some analysts drew direct parallels to Syria in 2024, when government forces lost control of major provinces within a matter of days. By today, however, the picture has begun to shift. Malian government forces, operating jointly with units of the African Corps, have moved to counter-offensive operations and have begun methodically restoring control over populated areas. According to incoming data, control over Bamako and the majority of major cities has now been restored. Information is also coming in about the full restoration of control over Gao. The situation in the northeastern part of the country, particularly around Kidal, is fundamentally different. According to available information, when conditions in the city became critical, Russian units together with Malian security forces began an organized withdrawal to the former UN base located in the southwestern part of Kidal. A perimeter defense was established there. The city came under separatist control, while Russian units held the base itself. Emergency negotiations then began between the African Corps Command and the armed formation leadership over the provision of a corridor for withdrawal. And judging by the information coming in, an agreement was reached. Russian units were granted safe passage out of the base, presumably in the direction of Gao and along the river. Here, however, there is a detail that cannot be glossed over. Malian government forces were not granted an equivalent corridor. In other words, the separatists drew a distinction. Russian military, exit permitted; Malian forces, exit denied. This in itself speaks eloquently about the nature of the negotiations and about precisely whom the armed formations regard as their primary adversary. At present, both the African Corps and Malian government forces are apparently conducting a regrouping. Once that is complete, an operation to reclaim control over the northeastern regions of the country is expected to recommence. Sources also report that this separatist operation did not take place without the diplomatic involvement of Algeria, and, notably, with a certain degree of facilitation from France, which has traditionally maintained an extensive intelligence and political network of influence throughout its former colonies. We will be watching the situation in Mali very closely. This is one of the most critical axes of Russian presence in West Africa, and the resolution of this crisis will significantly shape the future configuration of Russian interests across the entire region. Summing up today's review, we can state the following. On the Ukrainian theatre of military operations, the most significant event of the day is the maneuver on the Slavansk direction. The creation of a bridgehead along the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal with a crossing to the Ukrainian side. This is an operationally significant success, and its consequences will begin to be felt in the coming days. In parallel, the offensive on Konstantinovka is developing, with regular forces now committed to the operation. Strategic aviation is regrouping. A strike is expected before or during the May holidays. In Mali, Russian military presence has withstood a serious test of endurance but has lost control of the northeastern regions of the country. The situation remains dynamic. In the Middle East, talks have reached a dead end, and both sides appear to be moving toward another escalation. Israel continues to form its buffer zone in Lebanon, without regard for declarative ceasefire arrangements. This has been the briefing for April 26, 2026. As always, track the developments, verify your information, do not take any side at its word. Our mission is to give you the tools for your own analysis. If you found this episode useful, leave a like, share the video with those for whom understanding what is happening in the world matters. And once again, a special thank you to our sponsors and everyone who supports the channel. You are the ones who make this work possible. Until the next episode, take care of yourselves.